All right, Enola Holmes 2. You'd be forgiven if you saw this movie and saw a 2 at the end of the title and you never even heard of the first one. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. The first one came out in 2020, which, as we know, was a very strange year. I think it came out like around the end of summer or like September maybe, which is also a weird time for like movies in general to come out. I didn't have really any strong feelings about the first one. I thought it was kind of meh. It did get half decent reviews, and I guess enough people must have watched it to give it a sequel. And so here we are with Enola Holmes 2. This movie picks up pretty much right after the events of the first movie, which I'm going to be honest, I don't really remember all that well. But basically, at the end of the first one, Enola Holmes, she solves like the big mystery of the movie, and so she decides to open up her own detective agency. However, because she is not only incredibly young, but also she's a female, and during this time period, there were still like not a lot of women's rights. Because of those two things combined, she's not getting a whole lot of business until a young girl comes to her as she's actually shutting down her business. And this young girl has lost her basically adopted sister, and she wants Enola Holmes' help finding out where she's at. And so that's basically the big mystery that we try to unravel through the course of the film. What I've always appreciated about Sherlock Holmes movies or Sherlock Holmes adjacent movies, regardless of who's playing Sherlock Holmes or who's directing it or like what the tone of it is supposed to be, I appreciate that the audience really never figures out stuff before the main character does. Like, rarely does a Sherlock Holmes TV episode or movie, rarely do we cut away from like the main plot to show us something that's going to be revealing of like who's maybe behind the mystery. It's always like as soon as either Sherlock Holmes or in this case Enola Holmes discovers something or makes a revelation, that is the first time that the audience is connecting those dots as well. If you've ever watched a Sherlock Holmes movie and like accurately predicted what's going to end, it's because like you probably just got lucky and guessed. There's really no like situational irony in these movies where the audience becomes privy to information before the main character does, and that's the same case in this movie, which I really do appreciate. Like, I feel like nowadays movies kind of like pander to the audience, if that's the word I'm looking for. I feel like too much is revealed to the audience too soon, and then like it's really easy for the audience to guess like what's the twist at the end going to be. But in this movie and throughout the Sherlock Holmes kind of like franchise in general, I appreciate that the audience is kept kind of in the dark, and we discover things as the characters in the film do, which I appreciated about this film. As you know, I've talked a lot about on this channel how I feel about poorly done hand-to-hand combat and action sequences. In this movie, it's kind of 50-50. There are a couple of action sequences and like hand-to-hand fight scenes where some of it looked fine. Some of it, though, like, again, I've said this before, but it's very, like, choreographed where a character will, like, throw a punch or slice a sword, and they'll wait just, like, a half a second too long so that the other person can do, like, the counter move. Like, you can just tell that it's slightly choreographed. And that is mostly because the actors are doing their own stunts, which I do appreciate. But if they're not well-trained in that type of thing, then sometimes the fighting can look a little bit, like, stop motion almost. It's just, like, they wait just half a second too long. It just doesn't flow properly. And some of the fight sequences in this movie were well done. Some of them were a little bit like I was just saying. So that didn't detract from the film for me, but it's just something that I always notice when there's those types of scenes in movies. So it caught my eye. What I did ultimately enjoy a lot about this movie is the chemistry that the actors have with one another. I really, really enjoy the casting that has been done for these characters. I think Millie Bobby Brown is very enthusiastic. She gives it her all, and she's very endearing towards the audience. So I think she's like, I'd like to see more of her in this role. I really enjoy watching her. At the same time, an actor who has been in the news quite a bit recently is Sherlock Holmes in this movie, which there may be a lot of people who actually didn't know this, but Henry Cavill is Sherlock Holmes in these movies. In the first movie, he's not very featured heavily. He maybe has a couple scenes, but you can tell in this movie they definitely like. It was more like there's an Enola Holmes like mystery, but Henry Cavill is, I would say, a main character in this movie. So I appreciated seeing him more in this role, and I hope that they continue to do more. Like, I would be fine if they turn this into a TV show or just keep making like spin-off movies, but like I said, I really enjoy these characters. Sam Claflin is Mycroft Holmes, his brother, who's actually not in this movie, which was one big disappointment I did have. He was featured pretty heavily in the first one, so I don't know if he just didn't want to come back or if he had like a scheduling conflict or whatever, but he was not in this movie, which I would have liked to have seen him because I really liked him in the first one. Helena Bonham Carter is their mother, who is like seasoned perfectly in this movie. She only has like 2 or 3 scenes, but we do see her in flashbacks a little bit, but she's very charismatic, and I think she doesn't need to be in the movie a lot because her presence, like her acting is just magnetic that she doesn't need to be in it that much. But yeah, like I was saying, I didn't think I would enjoy the actors in these roles as much as I did, and that is actually what made this movie really enjoyable for me, if I'm being honest. Like, they had really good chemistry. I want to see more of these actors in this role, whether again that be if they decide to make a sequel or like a spin-off show or whatever, which they do kind of set it up, and this is more on the Sherlock Holmes side of things and the Enola Holmes side of things, but this movie does introduce a very famous adversary of Sherlock Holmes, probably his most famous adversary. If you're familiar in any degree with Sherlock Holmes, you know who I'm talking about, but for those of you who might not be, I'm not going to spoil it. And it is a very interesting take on that character, so I would be interested to see where they go with it. So again, the overarching point here is I want to see more. I want to see more. Overall, I would say this movie surprised me in how much I enjoyed it. Like I said at the beginning, the first one I did not have really any strong feelings towards. If anything, it was probably like would have been near the bottom of my list of movies of that year. But I had a really pleasantly good time watching this film. Like, it was well executed. As I said earlier, I really enjoy that the audience never gets information before the characters do. So it really keeps you like invested in the movie until the end, and it's really hard for you to guess what's going on unless you get lucky. Yeah, and the chemistry between the characters just worked, and I'd like to see more of these people in these roles. All right, so Enola Holmes 2, have you seen it? If so, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for more.